Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Untold Story. I'm Martha McCallum. So last night, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz met on the debate stage, stepping into the spotlight for the first time to show Americans who they are as vice presidential candidates. So following the debate last night, me and Brett and Dana and Laura and Jesse all talked about what went on that stage. We discussed some of the highlights, the impressions of the vice presidential candidates, and whether the debate has the power to move the needle with less than 35 days to go until the presidential election.
We saw some back and forth. The mics were open. What didn't we hear about? We didn't hear anything about the port strike, which they talked about at the top. We heard nothing about Ukraine, burning issues at the UN that we talked about all week here, the threats that we face in the world. But overall, J.D. Vance was strong out of the gate. He would give a forceful defense of the Trump administration on the economy and the border and Iran. Tried many times to reach women voters, I think, on a number of different subjects, which we can talk about. Very strong moment on the 329,000 missing children in this country. Walz was, I would say, good enough. Like, it's not going to hurt the ticket, likely. I'm anxious to hear what everybody thinks around the table. So let's get around the table and see what folks thought.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that Senator Vance pointed time and again, you heard it in his close, that Vice President Harris has been in office for 3.5 years. When it came to weak policy on Iran, the first questions dealing with that Iranian missile strike into Israel, on immigration and border issues, on inflation, coming back again and again to that. Governor Walz did appear nervous at first, but seemed to find his stride on the abortion stretch of questions where he talked about personal stories of women seeking abortions in restrictive states. But he really had a tough moment when he was asked about why he said he was in Hong Kong for the Tiananmen Square protest when he was actually really in Nebraska. He said sometimes he just says things and he's a knucklehead talking about things. Again, no questions about China, no questions about Ukraine. And there was some questions about fact checking and whether it was fair and balanced across the way. Here with us tonight, Dana Perino, Harold Ford Jr., Laura Ingraham, Jesse Waters, Britt Hume joins us remotely. Britt, your thoughts coming out of this debate?
Well, the moderators were obnoxious and made it feel like 3-on-1 on Vance, and Vance was just fine. He seems to have been, his skills as a debater and a speaker seem to have been honed to some extent by just these several months on the campaign trail. And for one so young, he seemed, in terms of his knowledge of policy, to run rings around poor Governor Walz, who I think did not have a very great night. As you say, Brett, he got better as the night wore on. But if you're rating this debate on points, it wasn't close. Vance had a good night.
Laura, what's your take?
Well, for those who question Trump's choice of Vance as his vice presidential running mate, I think those doubts should have been put to rest tonight. I don't think, and this is my 8th presidential campaign I think I covered, I don't think I've ever seen a Republican so deftly maneuver what was smug and arrogant bias on the part of those moderators. Almost every question was designed to make Republicans look bad, slanting Trump's views on child care. And yet Vance seemed to take it all in stride. And he really, I think with most questions, really showed his humanity and also his knowledge of the issues. I don't think he could have done better under the circumstances, and I think that is very reassuring to the public who thought he was perhaps an ogre or anti-woman or didn't like kids or some strange concoction of the stereotype that they were selling.
Harold.
I don't disagree with anything that's been said. As I was listening to some of the issues and really what I was looking for at the very beginning, was he likable? Were the candidates likable and optimistic? I think they both were. I think Senator Vance probably had a little better edge there because all the things that have been said about him. Were they smart and knowledgeable? There's no doubt both were. But at the beginning, it seemed that Governor Walz was a little rattled. And Senator Vance came out stronger and certainly sure of himself, which helped him well. Were they relatable? I thought both of them. One of the more remarkable things is they seemed to like each other. They shook hands. They talked about things they agreed on child care and other things. I agree with you. Abortion was where he really got his stride going. And finally, can you see both of them as president? I think, Senator Vance did himself a good job, and he's a young guy. Walz is a little older, and both of them seem to had some confidence in him. But there's no question on the economy and on immigration. I think that the Republicans still have their advantage. And on January 6th, in abortion and health care, Republicans have it on the other, and Democrats have it on that.
You know, Dana, obviously the Trump-Vance side is trying to reach out to improve those numbers with women. On the other side, for Harris and Walz, they need to improve their numbers with men. And you could feel both of them trying to do that at times tonight. Did they succeed?
Well, Vance did and Walz did not. You can understand why the Democrats spent the entire week trying to lower expectations for Walz. The only problem is for Democrats, they underperformed because the expectations should have been even lower than that. For any Republican or independent who is concerned about Vance, I actually think on the other side, it's so many Democrats tonight saying, why did Kamala Harris not pick Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania? Because I think that might have been a different debate. Vance made a concerted effort to talk directly to swing voters. And I don't think it was just women, but certainly men who might have been on the fence. I don't know what Walz did on that point for men. I do think that you're going to see a lot of the media say, why can't Vance just say Trump didn't win in 2020?
Right.
And they're going to try to hang that on him. And I think there will not be another debate, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kamala Harris doesn't want that to be the last word on a national stage.
35 days left, and that could have been the last debate. We'll see. That's what they're saying right now. Jesse, your thoughts?
Vance made 0 mistakes, and Walz made 2. Said he was friends with school shooters, and then couldn't explain why he was in China or wasn't in China. That was very strange.
All right, let's just play that soundbite. I think it's X4. Let's just play that moment where he gets fact-checked.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this is I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Oops.
I mean, he said he was in China during Tiananmen Square. I wasn't in China. That's pretty bad. J.D. Vance, everybody thought this guy was a bad guy. They were saying he was a creep. He looked beautiful tonight. He looked humble. He looked earnest, sharp, 20 years younger than Walz, new generation. I thought he was very polished. And then Walz didn't do what Walz was supposed to do. He didn't help with men tonight. He really never explained what Kamala's policies are. Did you guys get that? I still don't know what she wants to do. And then he talked about Minnesota more than he talked about her. JD's best times were when he said, well, housing costs are up now. Groceries up now. Borders open now. She's in power now. Why doesn't she fix it? She can do it right now, and she hasn't. The best line is when he said, Trump doesn't have just a plan. He has a record. And you can look at the record. And then he said, we're going to restore the American dream. CBS was terrible. Second question on climate change. You guys should have been doing this debate. That would not have been the second question.
The Untold Story continues right after this.
You know, I think it's interesting just listening to you talking, Jesse. I'm thinking about that we saw J.D. Vance as the writer of Hillbilly Elegy tonight. Mm-hmm. He spoke about fentanyl. He spoke about his mother's inability to pay her medical bills and leaving those on the back burner in order to put food on the table. And I think that he brought that person back. And I know you've spoken about this before, as that's how many people identified with him. And we saw that man again tonight.
Yeah, and I also think that if he and Walz were serving together in Congress, you'd probably see a lot of bipartisan bills. But the top of the ticket is Trump and Harris. So Vance was able to make Trump's case better sometimes than even Trump can. And for those who have tuned out Trump, because it's a long time to listen to somebody for 8 years, right? Some people love it. Some people can't take it anymore. But if you have a different voice and you think, oh, this guy, he's not I think that people would have probably paid a lot more attention to him because he could, as Laura was pointing out, he defanged all of the arguments and then answered them with a substantive policy that you could understand and grab a hold of.
There weren't
personal. Move the needle.
Didn't go personal, really, right? Tonight it wasn't a personal. And
Not
I
at
think,
each other.
I think J.D. Vance was actually made more human.
Yeah.
By Tim Walz. Tim Walz effectively conceded that J.D. Vance is a serious person, and we agree on some issues. But you said this about Trump in the past, and but that was kind of nicked him. It really didn't go deep. And so, to Harold's point, I think there actually was kind of a discussion. The moderators were completely biased, but I think J.D. kind of maneuvered that pretty well.
We'll say this, I didn't hear anything
this
from Republicans tonight as I did at the Trump-Harris debate when I got a lot of Republican friends saying that was wish this thing went in. Republicans were pleased. My friends tonight were pleased with what.
And you think about this race and how close it is, and you look at this. I mean, listen, is this going to move the needle? Probably not. Could have, maybe, but it probably isn't going to move the needle that much in the big picture of the race. But both men come out of there. Is one stronger than the other? Are we coming to the conclusion that J.D. Vance performed better, Harold?
I think so. I think the expectation, I disagree from the outset about more pressure was on Walz. I thought more pressure was on J.D., on Senator Vance, to say to women and to say to others. And he really didn't even get questioned. He got it was not a lot of gloves laid on him tonight, not a lot of punches thrown at him tonight. And I thought he presented well. Now, I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I got to tell you, he was more likable than I thought he was going to be.
And that's exactly what he needed to accomplish, right? I mean, that is, to sort of put some of these issues aside, that's what he needed to do. And the question is, because it is so tight, does this debate have the potential to move the needle even a little bit? Because a little bit's going to be that's going to be the deciding factor between the winner and the loser.
I think if you watched this tonight, you saw Kamala Harris picked this guy because she thought he was going to help with the Midwest, Rust Belt, Minnesota. Yep. And I think Dana's right. I don't think it moved the needle at all for men. I think J.D. Vance moved the needle a little bit for women.
That's a point. Jesse? What restaurant are you in? What restaurant are you in?
Back to the restaurant.
I'm going to eat at Trump's. I'm not a woman, so I don't know how women are going to receive this. I saw J.D. Vance in a completely different light. I was very impressed by his presentation. Walz didn't have a terrible night.
Right.
He didn't screw up that badly. He had a few moments, but I'm sure the Democrats are kind of pleased with it. No blood drawn, but in a tight race like that, I think J.D. performed well.
I don't think the Democrats are happy tonight at all. I think they wanted him. I want J.D. out of their misery.
But the last question that was asked about do you accept the results, Democrats wanted that question asked. I think Dana's right. To not be able to answer that question, that would be my one knock against J.D. tonight. And I think you showed the clip. I just wish Governor Walz just said, hey, at the beginning, I wasn't there. Big mistake.
They tried to pull.
But there was a couple moments that people said, "Wait a second." The fact check, the mic cut on J.D. Vance. There was, he talked about the hurricane relief, the strike on Israel. That was asked, but there wasn't anything about the port strike. There wasn't anything.
Which could end up impacting people's lives over the next few months in a big way. And we heard absolutely nothing about it tonight.
Yeah. So that's going to be obviously a part of this debate as well. And the big question is what comes next? And we have a lot of coverage right here on Fox all the way through.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Untold Story. I'm Martha McCallum. I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to The Untold Story with Martha McCallum. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Make sure to rate and review. For more podcasts, go to foxnewspodcast.com. Listen ad-free with the Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.